another planet or on the other side. This is the last frequency, and I am Mike Vara, and I don't know what. I thought we were having issues again, but we're good. All right, so folks, this broadcast is coming at you live from the capital city, Columbia, South Carolina, located on the east coast of the United States. And again, this is the last frequency, and I am Mike Vara. And I have a fantastic guest joining me. I have Glenn Steckling popping on the show with me this evening. And we're going to talk about George Adamski. We're going to talk about the UFO phenomena, obviously, and so much more. So, looking forward to speaking with Glenn. And maybe when on my next break, I'll try to turn that off. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I know it's coming through loud and clear on my headphones. Let's see something, huh? Yeah, it definitely is. Anyways, it should be a good show tonight. It is Monday night, and yes, we are live. It is 3/6/2023. Just for you, Mr. Black. And there you have it. We are live, and I bet it is better than the kickoff, right? Of course, everybody's jonesing now. There's no fixed NFL to watch, but it is what it is. So Glenn Steckling joining me here in just a little bit. In the meantime, I got some news and discovery, but don't forget, go on over there and subscribe and like the videos and all that good stuff, and I appreciate it. And do the same on Rumble. I have a channel over there as well, so I appreciate it. And so moving right along here, I social media, Facebook, you can find me there, Twitter, MeWe, Truth Social, on all of those. And don't forget the website. It is www.lastfrequency.com. www.lastfrequency.com. Archives are there, free. You just go ahead and help yourself. And video archives also 100% free. And so let's get it on, shall we? Get this thing going here. Oh, let's see. I've got a bio here someplace. I got a million things open, but I always do. I always do. So Glenn Steckling, the director and copyright holder of the 6-year-old George Adamski, 60-year-old, I'm sorry, George Adamski Foundation, one of the oldest enduring UFO organizations. Uh, he's got an extensive, his family, as a matter of fact, has an extensive history within the UFO field and their association with George Adamski. This includes the Steckling family's pioneering lunar anomaly research from the 1970s and 80s and his concerns regarding the developing agendas of misinformation focused on the revisionism of UFO history and perceptions, of course. Glenn's parents, the late Fred Steckling and his wife Ingrid, were personal friends and selected co-workers of George Adamski, considered by many as the pioneer in the early UFO contactee field. And guess what? We're going to bring him on. Barring any issues, we should be good though. Let's see here. And let's bring Glenn on with us. Good evening, Glenn. How are you tonight?
Good. How you doing?
I am doing just fine. It's a pleasure to have you here. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the video. I forgot about that. Let me get that. Okay. But hey, listen, welcome to the last frequency. I'm happy to talk with you tonight and looking forward to getting into some of this. So, what you been working on these days? What's the latest?
Well, we've had a few airline reports recently that did not make the news. I know that because I knew the people who saw it, and there's always something in this field to talk about. And so I think we can talk about that and the fact that the procedures of policy of keeping quiet has not changed all the way since its inception in the 1950s. So,
Yeah, and that's something I was going to bring up. They've went so there's such an extensive agenda at keeping this all under wraps, making people look crazy if they claim that they've seen these things, and now all of a sudden they come out and say, hey, yeah, these UFOs are real, and sure we've been chasing them, and why now?
well, they have no desire of giving you the information now. All they're doing is giving you the runaround, and that's what it's always been. I mean, when they keep you talking and concentrated on the naval events of 2008, that we're coming up on coming up on 20 years pretty soon on that, and they haven't told you anything. So are you really surprised? There is no such thing as disclosure. I did a whole YouTube program on the fallacy and the fantasy of disclosure, and so we can clearly see by the policies that are being practiced that you're not going to get any true information out of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't expect to either. Somebody had told me that the only reason they talked about these Tic Tac UFOs is because they were kind of got their arm twisted into it.
Well, I personally think that they're our own devices.
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
So, and so what happens is that when your own stuff gets exposed, then all kinds of alternative explanations come out. We did that with the U2 and the SR-71 and the Aurora and the model that's thereafter. I can't remember all the numbers and acronyms because there's a billion of them. But we that could very well be our own experimental devices. It's a possibility.
So then that's not to say that there aren't actual crafts coming from somewhere else, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. That's not to say that there are. I mean, there are tens and thousands. I mean, between Nightcap and the MUFON and Project Blue Book and Hynek. I mean, there's almost 40,000 unexplained sightings over the last 75 years. So I would say that, and then we have the lunar projects, the astronauts all talking and or being exposed as to what they had seen. So I mean, there is no doubt whatsoever that we have extraterrestrial visitors. So
Yeah. What have they said about the moon, the astronauts? Because it seems like I don't know. I guess a couple of them did come out, but others don't. I mean, I kind of thought like maybe when they bring them out, and say, "Hey, we're going to decontaminate you now before you're able to leave or go on about your business." Maybe they erase memories or something. But no,
no, have you ever been in the service?
I have not.
No, well, neither have I, but I sure know plenty that are. When you sign the Secrecies Act, and this is in my new book that I'm working on as we speak. When you sign the Secrecies Act, all these astronauts are high commissioned officers, test pilots from the rank of captain to colonel, and they all sign the documents of secrecy that holds them accountable to anyone who determines what national security is. And if you violate that and they decide to pursue you, you can go to military jail without a trial and you can get fined, uh, tens of thousands of dollars. So one wonders why there's statutes in the legal books, or at least the military law books, that if you talk about something that, according to them, doesn't exist, you go to jail.
Ah, okay. Boy, for me though, it'd be so hard to, keep that under wraps all those years.
Some didn't.
Yeah.
Gordon Cooper talked. Edgar Mitchell talked. Young talked, Brian O'Leary talked, uh, the Gemini astronauts, White, and others, had taken pictures, and those were reported in actually in magazines like Look and Time magazine. They weren't explained what they were, but they were certainly shown on those magazines.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what kind of stuff did they report? What did they,
They reported objects flying below them and above them and around them. And I mean, if you look at Maurice Chatelain's book, Our Ancestors Came from Outer Space, he's the one who invented the telecommunications and telemetry systems for the Apollo program, and holds 11 patents for it. And he categorically lists all the way from the first Mercury shot to the last Apollo shot all the UFOs that were witnessed by every single astronaut group within those ships.
wow, 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 wow. I never knew if it was 100% or not, but I heard a clip somebody had sent me once. It was supposed to be the astronauts when they were on the moon talking about they weren't alone or they were being watched or something.
Yeah, they're S-band frequency, very high frequency S-band because of the distances involved, and of course it had multiple frequencies for them to switch to mission control and change channels so that they could not be any hackers, because you had so many of these ham amateur radio hackers that were able to dial through and occasionally pick up frequency. So yeah, they talked about ships that were enormous, and they were talked about the fact that they weren't the only ones here on the moon, and not only were they not they were extraterrestrial, but our own people were already had been there before and had set up bases, establishments. So the lunar program or the NASA program was basically the public relations front for a much more covert operation that was working behind the scenes.
So then, would you say there's still stuff going on up there today?
Absolutely. If you take a telescope and halfway decent powerful, like an 8 inch, and that's what I got, and you look at areas of the moon, like, my father and I put them all in the book. We discovered alien bases on the moon too. And you look at the Straight Wall, the Alpine Valley, Crater Shikart, Tycho, oh, Archimedes, Gassendi. You can train your telescope on there, and if you're patient, you may get a chance to see something. Plenty have. In fact, NASA's own chronology listing, which just came out in '67, lists moving lights, moving objects, clouds, fogs, different colored lights, and vehicles, all kinds of stuff. And we know now that the moon has an atmosphere and it has a temperature in some places of a mean average of 63 degrees Fahrenheit. And then there's a water on the moon. So you add water, atmosphere, and warm temperatures, what do you think you're going to get?
Hmm, nice habitable spot.
Well, at least a habitable spot for life to evolve about. Yeah, a much better one than some other places.
So then that would say, I guess we'd have to say that all these nations must be in together then, because China goes and sends stuff up around there, and they ain't coming back and raising the alarms about it, right? So they must.
Well, do you really expect them to tell you? I mean, we are in a arms race again. It's just a quieter one, but we're back into the arms race again. This is how we managed to barely sustain our $40 trillion debt and our floundering economy and markets. And these countries like China and India and other ones aren't necessarily sympathetic to being told what to do. And for the longest time, the United States was the big dog who got to tell everybody what to do. And if you didn't do it, they would, suddenly funds appropriations would disappear, and assistance and help and all kinds of other things. And so they have no reason to cooperate. I think they're in their own mode of data collection and deciphering and determining what it means to them and what they can do about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess if I was another country and I seen that stuff, and I mean, do they know it's ours, or do they? I mean, they,
They know it's both. Absolutely, they know it's both. I mean, it's my God, it's been set. We've been since Apollo 17. We have not officially, and we'll use that word very lightly, been back to the moon, but we have sent equipment
eh,
there. We sent Clementine that did a high resolution, intense photographs of the moon, front and back side for the military project, which you don't get to see. I mean, if there's nothing there, and if you're not interested, why do you waste your time?
yeah, that's true, and it is really strange that we've never been back. I mean, it's right there. Why would we not go back? I mean, there's so much that we would want to learn yet about the moon that we obviously couldn't have learned. When the astronauts went there. So they must be. They must have something going on there.
Well, I think that they're worried about also exposure. The more activity you have, the more chances of exposure there is. So it's much easier just to keep things quiet if you can keep your potential sources of exposure at a distance.
Yeah. Now, what's the plan for Mars? Any knowledge on that? What's I've had people tell me there's stuff going on there too.
Oh, there's plenty of activity on Mars. I mean, if you look at Poultry and Molinari's study, which I have already from the late 70s, the Viking project before Viking landed, they came across the pictures of the face on Mars, which is a face, no
It
matter what
is.
angle you photograph it. And it sits on the plains of Cydonia where there are confirmed pyramids and structure lines, ancient acropolises, and things like that. And the author of the second book on Mars, my father met in Australia in '85, I believe it was, and at the university they were both talking at Brisbane, and he said, Crawley said that not only did they have abundant proof of ancient civilizations on Mars, but of also current ones. So there's plenty of activity on Mars as well. And the thing is, you just have to be able to ferret out the information from the misinformation. And then, of course, it doesn't help that you have a cadre of so-called ufologists who love to confuse and misinform and disinform, and they make every accusation in the book without providing any proof or foundation, and that itself hurts the subject greatly.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I was kind of under the one of my theories, I suppose you could say. It's not that I think this is what's going to happen, but a theory is all of a sudden they start coming out, oh, Tic Tac UFOs, this, that, and the other thing, and I thought, here they go. They're maybe preparing us for that fake alien invasion everybody's always talked about. And
Well, I think there was a statement made already in the 1960s that was very relevant, and that was made by George Adamski. He said, "You will never, ever get the truth out of the government or the military. They have too much at stake on the control and the politics and economics and overall world logistics and operations. But what you may get is you may get them to try to convince you that yes, finally, when they cannot any longer cover it totally up anymore, that the crafts, the intelligence, and the people that come from space are coming to harm you, and therefore we must continue this massive armament buildup. And instead of having it now as a Cold War against other countries, we will unify and make ourselves into a huge industrial complex in order to fight uh, supposedly the aggressive space people. And that is and Star Wars to a certain extent was part of that. That program was not only put in place to control countries and masses on the surface of the planet, but also to be reflected back into space as a shield in order to try to keep the other space visitors from visiting us. And those are the ones that are doing us good and helping us. We want to eliminate any beneficial influence that we can possibly control.
So yeah, that leads to a ton of questions too. With these other beings, our space brothers and sisters, if you will. One, where the heck are they coming from? Number two, what is their interest? And number three, if they do have an interest, how do they feel about what's going on here now? With the, I mean, it's like evil all over this place.
Well, we can say that only because we perpetuate the promotion of that all the time. There used to be
Yeah,
a time where you could turn on a news channel and they tell you a story of something that actually nice that happens or people that helped one another, something that would give you a little bit of a uplift or a hope message. Instead, we hear hours and hours and endless programs run in succession of the worst of the um, type of atrocities that happen. And so, I mean, if you listen to it long enough, it will affect you. As any police officer will tell you, it's very difficult psychologically to deal with so much of the crime and violence and not have it have an emotional impact on you yourself. So
yeah.
this is just normal psychology 101. And so um, I think that we have to take a look and understand that they come from places or several different places. There's talk about the system of Alpha Centauri. There's talk of the system of was it called 359? I forgot the first name of it. Um, and there's talk about planets in our system too that can sustain life. And so there's a multitude of activity going out in space. I mean, all you have to do is look at a picture from the Webb telescope, and the number of trillions and billions of stars and systems and planets that fill up 2 square inches of screen is beyond countability. Anybody who looks at that and is not truly amazed at the expanse. I mean, in reality, we've only mapped 2% of our own star field.
Yeah.
And so these visitors come, and they've come from over a period of time from different places. One group came a couple 100,000 years ago, another group 65,000 years ago. Then there is another group that came by after the Great Flood of 12,000 years ago. That took several thousand years for the planets and for the societies on this planet to try to rebound. So there are different groups that come from different places, and they come for a multitude of reasons. One, discovery, exploration, and the expansion of one's understanding is inherent within our genome. In other words, is inherent in nature as well. But we have this within us to explore and to expand our understanding. We do it in smaller versions by jumping on an airplane flying to Australia or China or wherever. They do it in a little larger scale because their technology is 4 or 5 thousand years ahead of us, and they can do it in a planetary or systemic situation. So first and foremost, they explore and discover and interact. Secondly, they are monitoring the solar system. The solar system is in a decline phase. Like everything else, there's birth, function, and then decline. And right now, we're in a downward sloping decline stage in which the sun has increasing its activity of solar flares and electromagnetic disturbances into space. You're looking at a polar shift of the sun every 11,000 years. You're looking at 26,000 years planetary shift here on Earth, and this causes increased volcanic activity. We have at least, if you do a little look and research, we have at least 30 active volcanoes around the planet, and the number of earthquakes, as we know from Turkey, are increasing, and the reciprocation of those earthquakes that travel along the fault and gas lines to the other parts of the planet happen just as well. And so there is a, excuse me,
Mhm.
there, pardon me, there, there are these ships that come and they go into our oceans, deep into the trenches, down Marianas Trenches and other places where the tectonic plates are the deepest, that allows them closer, 30,000 feet closer access to the floor and mantle of the Earth, and allows them to record data concerning the plates, the movements, the core, the spinning of the core, the density of the magma, and all these things which determine the health of our planet, because they know that if one planet suddenly is destroyed, the rest of the planets are all destroyed as well. You yank one planet out of orbit, and the rest of the orbits collapse.
Oh,
And so the whole solar system will then go. Just like if the sun goes, that naturally the rest of the planets go in the solar system too. It turns into a black hole in which all the material from the solar system is swept into and demagnetized, re-energized, and come out the other side of the black hole as the raw materials to build the next solar system. The black hole is not a portal on which you can transport yourself through space. This is once again science fiction nonsense. You travel through a black hole, you ain't coming out the other side except in very tiny atoms, right? And
yeah.
so then they are looking at that, and then they also are concerned with our development. They see us as they once were many thousands of years ago, but they are perplexed by our attitudes. if we were given two choices, the odds are always that we select the worst choice,
Hmm.
rather than making any type of, shall we call it, intelligent evaluation, so that we can make better choices and have greater understanding. And we revel in what they consider to be the absolute unimportant things in life that get you nowhere. There's nothing that you can acquire that you can take with you when you pass away. All right. And so, the so-called stand on history, well, we found out these days they tear down everybody's statue and they rewrite history if they don't like it. And
Yeah.
each group has got their own agenda for this kind of nonsense. And so we don't act as rational thinking human beings sometimes. And other times we can be extraordinarily good. We can be extraordinarily helpful. And but we do things in strange ways. We bombed the ever-loving heck out of Europe, and then we spent billions of the U.S. dollars in the Marshall Plan to rebuild it all.
Yeah.
And they can't understand why we are so duplicit in our actions and in our meanings. We can't be trusted with what we say, and we can't be depended upon, and so they are therefore extremely careful when they come here.
Yeah, well, yeah, and they definitely should be. I mean, and that goes without saying. People say, "Oh, why don't they just land?" I mean, would you land on this planet? I mean, I mean,
Well, the fact is they have. I mean, if you go through recorded history and you go past, even past biblical times, Enoch, Elijah, Ezekiel, into the biblical times where they describe flying scrolls, flying shields, the wheel within the wheel. I mean, there has got to be about 400 descriptions based upon the language and understanding of that period of history that describes these type of crafts. The beings that came from the sky are depicted with wings because they had no other method of trying to tell or depict that somebody came from the sky unless they were able to fly like a bird. That doesn't mean that the people had big old wings and they were walking around like giant parrots. I mean the misnomers and the information is just rampant. Recently, I watched a program where they're trying desperately to convince the people that abductions were something that happened in the past as well, whereas in fact, the program initiated in 1961 and it was initiated by our own forces on this planet, our own governments. But then they use words like so and so said that he was taken into the ship and flown around. But they stress the word taken. So they want you to believe that somebody grabbed him, hog-tied him, blindfolded him, and threw him in the ship, which is absolute garbage. When somebody takes me to 7-Eleven to pick up a quart of milk, they don't do that to me either. Taken into the ship means opened the door and said, come along, let's go. But there is this war of semantics and war of domination going on in order to try to scare the ever loving heck out of the general public. And it is not true.
So, but do you believe that people do get abducted?
Not by aliens.
No. I see. I
They
thought.
have they have they have nothing they're nothing to gain from them. First of all, the equipment that they have allows them to scan your body from space. They can sit in the lounge of their ship in orbit like you would be sitting in a first class lounge in a 747 traveling across the world. And their instrumentation allows them to record your conversation, video record you like we doing here on Skype or Zoom, re- read and record your thoughts and your mind's thinking and your bodily functions all the way down to the subatomic level. They don't have to come down here and chase you around like a chicken and try to do some nasty experimentations on there. There's absolutely nothing that you have that they need. They are so far more advanced than you represent something that is ancient and archaic to them. They don't need to do that. They don't take your cattle either.
Well, that makes a lot of sense too. They would definitely have the technology, I guess, to get what they want. It goes. I mean, then there's the cattle mutilations, and I thought, how many cows do they need? I mean, are they eating them? Because I mean, that's a lot of cows, you know.
Let me give you an example. I was just doing research last night, making additions to my book. 1967, they find a cow that is eaten by bacteria. Without mentioning names, there's a certain person that would run there immediately and start claiming aliens, aliens, aliens. Well, the vet came out and found out that the horse had been shot with 22 twice, and the shots had caused an infection in the body of the horse that allowed the bacteria, like an Ebola type of bacteria, to eat through the body of the horse, having absolutely nothing with aliens. In Utah, also in my book, is the fact that the Atomic Energy Commission tried to hide that the atomic testings that were in New Mexico and Utah, the radioactivity in the water that went into the water, the underground soil, and the air, killed thousands upon thousands of livestock. Had nothing to do with aliens and never will and never would. This is nothing more than a hokum story in order to get some sensationalism and make you think that these aliens are coming here to do you harm. And there's a reason behind that. And that reason is they do not want you to be susceptible to want to willingly and peacefully interact with them when they land. That's why you got programs like V, where they look like humans and then pull off a mask and then look like a reptile. The and all these praying mantis and flying Sasquatches and all this other stuff that comes. Well, it all comes out of imagination and science fiction. We recently had the new movie Avatar, and it
Yeah.
wasn't 2 weeks before some guy reported that he encountered a blue alien with a long tail. And
Yeah.
right away, the UFO community members went running there to get a piece of that story. I mean, it is almost shamefully pathetic of what is going on.
It is, and thank you for being so blunt too. Because there is. I mean, I've been doing this certainly not as long as you've been doing what you do, but I've been doing it a little while, and I've heard a lot of stuff, and especially these conferences. These conferences are something that you rarely ever see the real experiencers at these things. It's always, I don't know. It's always like somebody who was in a special program and was on Mars, and now they're Superman, and yeah, I'm just all kinds of crazy stuff at these conferences now. I did go to a MUFON conference a couple years back, and it was kind of refreshing. It was just totally UFO topic, uh, the basics.
Right. Well, if you look on YouTube under my name, you will find that I did a 3.5 hour MUFON interview with the San Diego MUFON. Since I live here close to San Diego, I've done it in person several times, but this one was via Zoom because of the remnants of COVID and things like that. So that has been posted under my name in YouTube, and we divided it into 3 sections, so it wouldn't be so arduous to sit through it all. You can look at it in sections at your own convenience. We talk about many of these things as well. And so I am trying very hard, especially with my new book, uh, you know, um, to push the thought of some normalcy, some reality, the history of what has actually happened within this UFO field is out there, but it is rapidly being distorted and rapidly being buried so that the new generations will be totally brainwashed and will have no reference point to be able to reconcile or logically determine what goes on. I mean, if the ship should land, how many people would run in fear? I would say 90% of the people would run like crazy because they're afraid of being eaten,
Yeah,
inseminated, sodomized, chopped up, or whatever the heck we accuse them of now. We accuse them of every nasty thing we can possibly think of. In fact, we accuse them of acting like us if we really want to look at it
that's
in
true.
true terms, right? And so how many people will be too afraid to approach and actually have something of value happen? And I mean, there were circumstances in the past. I mean, there were 3 students that were camping out by the pyramids of Mexico in the 50s, where a ship landed, took them on board, and flew them around the moons of Saturn and brought them back and left them. We had many circumstances of people who went on board these ships and accurately described the conditions and space on the moon, like George Adamski did so much in his books and in his lectures. And now we start to begin to kind of acquiesce slightly. You have to read between the lines. Like I mentioned to you before, they just now started to admit that there's a slight atmosphere on the moon. But if
Yeah,
you read 99% of the stuff online or anywhere, they say the moon's a dead planet. It's still the information from 50, 60 years ago. It hasn't changed any, and they don't want to change it any. So you've got some atmosphere. That means you have atmospheric motion. So the reason that the flag fluttered when the Apollo astronauts put us there is because you have a slight lunar atmospheric wind that moves about the surface depending upon the day, the sun, topography, many different factors, and that wind moves. It also blows the dust around. We also know that there's water on the moon. 1971, we already admitted that our equipment recorded water geysers spraying out of the lunar surface from 7 to 14 hours. And now, recently, the article I have here on my desk, we have found areas on the moon, depressions in the moon, like the bottom of craters and these type of below lunar sea level geographics, where the temperature is a constant, not variable, constant 63 degrees Fahrenheit. And we know that atmosphere compresses as you go lower, below sea level. If you go to the Dead Sea, if you go to the Mojave Desert, if you go areas in the world where it's below sea level, the atmosphere is thicker, denser, more oppressive in a way to breathe, harder to breathe. And and so you use this atmospheric compressibility, which increases density. It also increases temperature. And now you've got a standard temperature in the 60s, and you add water to that. What do you expect to happen? Life.
Yeah.
It's the same
Yeah.
thing as you have here, life. The funny thing is that the instruments that we sent to Mars, they were tested in the Atacama Desert, and they read that there is no life in on this planet. So, so that's the quality of what we're sending. But going back to Mars and Cydonia, when Petrie and Molinar released those photographs, and they're just not photographs, they're radar spectroanalysis. They are a whole series of stuff. I'm surprised that anybody that still can get a hold of such things. They're probably in most people's libraries. I've got two of them. It shows you what's going on. And Viking was scheduled to land on the plains of Cydonia until that discovery was announced. Immediately, Carl Sagan changed the landing spot to a completely different place of Utopia, which was full of boulders and rock strewn and totally inhospitable. The scientists complained that it was a dangerous landing site. They would probably lose the lander because of the terrain. And the last minute change was to keep from putting our equipment down and photographing what was sitting right there. I mean, what else needs to be said?
Yeah, yeah. So, and again, like you said, we're never going to get the truth from these guys. They're never going to tell us anything. I mean, will we ever find out? Will the ETs tell us? Someone's got to tell us.
Well,
Well,
what
they,
I'm hoping that there becomes a growing a private commercial space enterprise like SpaceX and some of these companies that can build this equipment with new technology. I mean, when you look at inside an Apollo spacecraft, if you've ever been in the Smithsonian and looked inside, and now you look at the inside of the new SpaceX, I mean, oh my God, that's 60 years difference. The technology should be different. We have advanced incredibly as well, and I'm hoping that the more we go into space, uh, the more people will see, and eventually there will be an inability to cover as much up. Now, my larger fear is that we are some very nasty people on this planet, and if that program poses a threat to exposure that they don't want, then all of a sudden a very nasty accident happens on the pad before takeoff. And then if one of these things explodes and kills the astronauts, then automatically there's a public reaction to step back and uh, and uh, and
yeah,
slow down our pace and things like that. So we are not above using any and all means and methods, just as the same way that we accuse our enemies, whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else. I remember a computer expert friend of mine. They were talking about the Chinese hacked us 500,000 times a day. He
Yeah.
says that's nothing. We hack them at least 1,000,000 times a day.
Oh yeah, they're
And
all doing it to each other.
they're all doing it to each other. We're all using the same methods, and and there is no honor among thieves. There's no good guys and bad guys and white hats and black hats. It's only self-interest, and the self-interest is perpetuated by our one world government that operates underneath the lines of our so-called countries and capitals. This stuff that we see in Washington or Moscow or anything like that, that's nothing but the facade for the public to keep them somewhat happy and somewhat agitated
Yeah.
so that they are easily manipulated.
Oh yeah, that whole white hat thing, boy, I don't know how much I've heard about that over the last decade. The white hats are gonna come, they're gonna save everything. Baloney. Just you know, I don't see that happening anytime soon. It hasn't happened. But they're always looking for a hero, and people are, and it comes down to it. It's like we're our own heroes. We need to step up if
Well, that's the old saying that President Kennedy that God's work must truly be our own, and but I can tell you from personal experience that they have come. I have met them. I have known some of them for a period of years. I have not seen any of them for, oh, that I'm cognizant of for about at least 12 years. If anybody tells you that they can summon a space person or draw a ship to them, they are lying through their teeth because that is not how they work. They observe the situation very carefully. They have to observe the situation around you, then further around you the consequences, then what will it do to you? What will it do to those around you? How will it all be manifested and assimilated? And what will the overall consequences are? We here are like children peeing in the wind. We don't care about the consequences. We're often too stupid to even want to know about them. But they consider every feasible consequence because they know what the law of compensation is, what we call karma, which we have misidentified to some extent, and they want to make sure that what they do is right and good and has the least negative impact. Where we just say, oh, what the hell? Just do it and let the chips fall where they may. And that's and that's what's happened here when you look at the planet. It's not only the chips have fallen, the cow chips have fallen.
uh-huh. And so now you said you've met them. You've
Yes.
you have. So what are they like?
They're not any different than you and I are. They're human beings just the same. Their internal organs are the same. They look the same. When my father was before the scientists, my father and mother were invited NASA Goddard Space Flight Center in 66 before 22 scientists to show the films that he had from George Adamski and his own film that he had taken, which was quite famous in Germany on the train that very same year. And there was talk about how many space people were walking amongst us. And my father wrote down a number, and the scientist wrote down a number, and they changed the papers, and they were about the same number. So they knew that the information they were getting was correct. They also knew the difference of how the craft worked, how the ships in the atmosphere were electrostatic, and the ones that were out in space were electromagnetic, using a slightly different principle, using the trillions and billions of kilowatts of energy, like a Tesla coil that radiates from the magnetic poles of the planet, like dropping a pebble into the pond. You see the waves go out in circles, concentric circles, and those are how the waves of energy leave the planet. When you explode an atomic bomb, those waves get disrupted and get jungled, and the planet rings like a bell. It can be audibly recorded. The Japanese, in fact, did so. And so we what exploded 815 or 835 underground nuclear devices. That's just us, and then another 400 in the atmosphere. What we have done to our own planet has reverberated out into space and sent warning signals everywhere else. And they're coming here to say, hey, what are these morons doing?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When they were testing these atomic bombs in the beginning, I read where they didn't even know if what it would do, if it would set the whole atmosphere on fire or not. But they did it anyways.
Well, they thought it would punch a hole in the ionosphere, whether it would suck all the oxygen uh, out of the off of planet Earth. Well, I say oxygen. Let's face it, it's nitrogen that really sustains life. The atmosphere is 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, and then 1% of the trace elements of argon and the rest of them. But we're mostly nitrogen, and so yeah, we would we were so ignorant that we were willing to destroy the entire world and everybody and everything living here to see what the experiment would do. Not only that, if you did a little bit of reading, you found out that the military positioned the Marine battalion when they exploded the first bomb out there in White Sands at certain distance, concentric distance from the atomic explosion to see what would happen to them. Our own troops, our
Holy
own
cow!
patriots. This is how we treat our own people.
Uh, I'll tell you, I don't want to get all crazy political here, but I'll tell you what, uh, we we are one of the evilest species. I don't know why the ETs. Well, I mean, there are some good. There's some good ones on the planet, no doubt. But I mean, those who are in charge, I mean, are they even Earthlings at all? Are they human? I mean,
Of course they are. That's because here we do have some negative influences. To say that everyone that comes from space is a benevolent angel is a false statement. However, there is a standard upon which they will not even go because once again they know that the law of equity or karma affects all creation. And if you set something in motion and action purposely bad, that eventually is going to come back to you. And that's not a price that is too willingly or happily paid. So they stay within certain parameters. So they come and they like to give us what we want so that we dance like puppets. Think of our politicians. You go to any one of our politicians and say, hey, you want to be president? We can make it happen. You want to be a billionaire? We can make that happen too. Whatever you want, we can make that happen. All you got to do is what we want afterwards. And how many lines of people are going to line up and down the street because they don't care about consequences? They want to have instant gratification now. And
that's right.
so so they basically give us what we want to get what they think is a control uh, issue over things that happen on this planet. So it's a combination of both our own people who willingly uh, agree to that, and then their own influence as well. Let me give you a little example. 1954, George Adamski picked up President Eisenhower in Palm Springs, and they went out to an air base in which one of these ships was scheduled to land and did land. And Eisenhower was introduced to the human space occupants. And there was a discussion made that if we were willing to openly divulge the information of space visitors and technology to our populations, they would help us in transitioning certain technologies and away from some destructive things and things like that. Now, what the UFO community has done is totally bastardized that story. They have taken the story and said, well, Eisenhower went out to the air base and he met this gray alien monstrous figure who wanted to have blood samples and DNA and body samples for us in cooperation for certain things. This is how these stories get totally twisted. Roswell got twisted. That got twisted. Adamski took John Kennedy out to the base in 62 and his brother, the Attorney General. So much information has been totally perverted that when you go to one of these UFO conventions, and I used to go to many of them, not all of them, and then finally I just got sick and tired of it. I mean, they got one running up in Los Angeles called Alien Con. I think they got the second word of it right, at least.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard about that one. And then there's Contact in the Desert. I know that runs every year. And you know,
Do
there's
you know that Contact in the Desert absolutely refused? I offered them when the first one opened up. It's right there near George Van Tassel's place in Giant Rock. And around the corner, not too many miles away, is Desert Center, where Adamski had his contact, and the pictures and newspaper articles that all came out of those craft coming down and land and a person coming out making contact. So I offered to them, as I have done over many of the years, at no cost whatsoever, no speaking fees, no honorariums. They didn't have to pay for my hotel expenses, nothing. I said, if you want to, I'll come. I've had the films all digitized. I'd be happy to show you the pictures and films and answer any questions that people might have. They refused it. They
wow,
refused it for 4 solid years
holy smokes! Well,
because they want to ostracize Adamski. There is a complete concentrated program to me, I find it incredible. With all the alien monster creature feature stories, all the science fiction movies, all this other stuff going on, they are scared out of their pants of one guy, George Adamski, who actually had not only clear, credible photographs, motion picture films. He went to the government. He went before the Queen Juliana. He went before the Pope. He is the one they are scared the most of because he talks about human beings who have come to visit us and perhaps give us some help and do us some good. And they hate him tenaciously.
wow. Well, Glenn, hang on with me for a few minutes. I want to take a break here. And when we come back, maybe you could talk a little bit about George Adamski for those who might not know. Give a little background there. And so hang on with us. Everyone else, hang on. This is The Last Frequency, airing on the VARA network. We're also over on Rumble. If you want to go over to Rumble, you could join the chat room over there and have at it, and you can watch us. We're both in studio. Well, I'm in studio. He's on screen, and so we'll be back in just a few minutes, folks. Don't go away. It's really a tragedy the way this UFO phenomena and well, our space brothers and sisters have been well not only kept from us, but then exaggerated horribly. We'll be right back.
So I'll say this. The president has been very clear, as you know, the president has been very clear, very, very clear. The president is doing what these are items that the president has been very clear on.
Wonderful. Repeat the line.
And so the president has been very clear. The president has been very clear.
Excuse me.
The president's been very clear. Why? Look, the president has been very clear.
But is he going to specify exactly?
No, but he has.
The best way to get something done that if it holds near and dear to you, that you like to be able to
Stand by, Carolinas.
Columbia.
Excellent, excellent.
Good off season.
Hey, frequencies of all.
Constant uncertainty and danger. Imagine if something unthinkable happens tomorrow. With an
Frequency.
You are the resistance.
a member, be informed. Always inform others. Real easy to do. And it's all free. It's not charging you for nothing over there. Although, if you have it within your means, by all means, don't hesitate to hit that donate button. That certainly helps take some of the burden off me, and I'll continue to bring you the best guests with the best information each and every Monday night, and now Sunday nights too, 9 p.m. That'll be on YouTube this week. Censorship YouTube. I'll just, like I say, we'll keep it totally paranormal for YouTube, and you're going to use their outlet to get the word out too, one way or the other. Anyway, so let's get back to it. So, Glenn, we are back, and about George Adamski. Maybe a little background.
All righty. Well, I'll give you some background on George. Quickly, I just want to mention one other subject. About 2 weeks ago, one of my airline compatriots, since I'm a retired airline pilot, told me about a sighting that happened at night during the red eye between the West Coast and East Coast around 3 o'clock in the morning, in which 5 different airliners, Qantas, American, Delta, United, and Spirit, the crew members of all those 5 airplanes witnessed for 20 minutes a number of UFOs in the skies above them flying in formation, then coming to a stop, moving clockwise, stopping, going counterclockwise, starbursting away and back, and then back up into space. Air traffic control also was in on the frequency, because in the airliners we also have what's known as a common frequency where we can talk to each other that does not interrupt with air traffic control frequencies. And the chatter was unbelievable. Not one single word mentioned in any media outlet. So if you think that disclosure is coming, well, you got a long time to wait. So I just thought I'd pass that along, since that just recently happened, and people are always interested in apparently in what is new, and that's some of the problem, because we forget what is past and older. That gives us some perspective on things. George Adamski was considered the pioneer in the UFO contactee field. On November 20th, 1952, him and 6 other witnesses were driving in Desert Center, which is halfway between Palm Springs and Blythe, off of Highway 10, Highway 177, Rice Road, towards the Coxcomb Mountains, and they noticed in the air a large cigar-shaped craft surrounded by smaller ones. Now, to give this further credence, if you look into Project Blue Book, there's a report by Military Aircraft on Maneuvers, a B-50, that reports seeing a UFO over the Desert Center area exactly at the same time that Adamski had witnessed his. In his case, they pulled the car over, they took some photographs, and I'm happy to share those online with anybody who would like to see those. And one of these crafts came down behind the hill and sat down, and an individual came walking out down the gully, and George walked up the dry riverbed, about a few hundred yards, And there he met a person that was about 5'5". The reason I looked to the side is because I have a full-size painting that was done in the rendition of that particular extraterrestrial here in my office, the original. And with a bronze-colored skin, sort of Mediterranean, with little olive eyes, a little bit semi-Asian in a way, and wearing a bronze jumpsuit, like a flight suit that our aviators would wear. And they had contact there in the desert. And during that particular time, there had been some moisture, which is common in that area during the winter months, just like it is there now. I was out there just a couple weeks ago. And the footprints underneath the soles of the shoes, think of them like our expensive basketball shoes because they're all designed and corrugated and symbolized on the bottom. The bottom of his shoes were very much the same. They held symbols on the bottom, and those symbols hold the key to electromagnetic propulsion. It is part of the symbols that was given to George as well. So what happened is a space person pointed to George's pocket, and inside the pocket, George had one of these 2.5 by 2.5 glass emulsion plates. Because in those old days, the Browning cameras used a glass emulsion plate instead of a negative. And this one was blank, and so he gave it to him. And that man, eventually, when their conversation was finished, went into his ship and flew back away. 3 weeks later, at the base of Mount Palomar, Palomar Gardens, which is now known as Oak Knoll Campground, the ship flew down between the trees. There's a picture of it, and dropped a package out of the bottom. And in that package was the glass plate that George had given the spaceman. And on there were a series of hieroglyphs carved into it. And those hieroglyphs match hieroglyphs and petroglyphs that were discovered 10 years later in the Brazilian jungle by Professor Marcel Homé in an area called Piedra Pintada, or the Painted Rock. And they were dated to be anywhere from 10 to 30,000 years old. And so the combination of these symbols, which are about 80% exactly the same, and I wish I could show you the photo of it because when they're side by side, it is quite dramatic. The South African sign engineer by the name of Basil Vandenberg used that and the footprint symbols to build a free energy electromagnetic motor. And he corresponded with George and said, well, I'm going to call a press conference in London and I'm going to go up there and I'm going to bust this whole thing wide open. George cautioned him not to do it because the influences of all the different industries, whether it's petroleum or what have you, that control our economic cycles, are not too happy about that. And so the guy got on the airplane. He made a stop midway to switch airplanes, and he was never seen again anywhere. So George had this contact in 52, and he had subsequent contacts thereafter. In 55, he was taken aboard one of these craft and was flown into the upper atmosphere. He described the firefly effect in space, the one that John Glenn reported in 63. George described flying around the moon and seeing the light haze of the atmosphere and all the different manifestations and constructions, the clouds, the mists. The same thing NASA reported in 66 in their report. And he was well recognized within the political and scientific field. When we met him in March of 1963, it was because we had seen these craft for a number of years already. 2 years earlier in Denver, we saw a large cigar-shaped craft with little scouts, and also did some other people. If you look in the NICAP's records, you will find several reports as well there. And so on the streets of Washington, we witnessed this along with 30 other people in a newspaper for the Washington Post. And it was in the next paper in the next 2 days later. And the only adjustment to the story was that the report of seeing the craft at 1,200 feet above the city had now been changed to 12,000. And my father, who is an aviation buff and a private pilot, He said that's impossible because an image that is at 1,200 feet versus 12,000 feet is 10 times smaller. And so he called up the newspaper editor, and the editor said, sorry, but I was informed by national security personnel that I cannot use that number of 1,200 because it indicates or would indicate that we have no control of the airspace above our nation's capital, and therefore we do not have the security blanket that we promote and tell everybody. And so my father said, enough of this, went to the Library of Congress, went to alphabetically in the fact section, not fiction, fact. A for Adamski, found the book Flying Saucers Have Landed, co-authored with Sir Desmond Leslie, who, along with Lord Mountbatten, was the last Viceroy of India, the uncle to Prince Philip, and also Lord Dowden, who was Lord Air Marshal for the armed forces during the Battle of Britain, were firmly believed in UFOs. And so we contacted and saw the pictures, exactly telescopic pictures taken out here at Mount Palomar that we had seen in Washington. We contacted George. He was coming to Washington 3 months later to lecture to the Air Force Reserves. And we went and met him. And in the front row of the lecture sat all the military people in their full uniform and regala, listening to every word he had to say. So while so many of the so-called UFO community poohoos George Adamski, he was not that in official circles. Scientists would call him, and I have letters from people like Frank Edwards, who lost his syndication because he was so vocal on the UFOs, letters to George, and letters from other notable scientists and people that were talking about the UFO subject. And also, they came to him to help them with their satellite construction because after Sputnik went up in December of '57, we followed shortly thereafter, 2 months. And the trouble is that our instrumentation showed that the temperature of the Earth was 1,800 degrees and there couldn't be any life here. And George said to them, that's because you're bouncing your signals off the ionosphere, which is that temperature, to protect the rest of the planet. And you have to encapsulate your instrumentation like a thermos bottle within a 3-hull system, which they did. And they got accurate readings after that. So there was nobody and is nobody like George Adamski. Nobody who had the quality of materials, photographs, motion picture films taken around the world of these crafts in motion that went and spoke officially to leaders of the world on world tours and went and spoke for free in foreign countries, not for more money like these days where they go and one of these notable so-called people charges $5,000 an appearance. You know, I mean, uh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean,
let's not even go further into a description of what I think about that. But anyway, so so George was the most unique individual in this UFO field. And like I said before, it amazes me how the rest of them are so adamantly attacking this one sole man who had 2 suits to his name and a couple $1,000s in his checking account when he died, and that was it. He profited not at all from this particular subject. He thought that this was far too important to the people of the world and to everybody's thinking and evolution. He instilled those characteristics into my father and mother as we knew and worked and lived with him for the last 2 years when he was on the East Coast with us. And he handed my father the briefcase and asked him to continue the program. Mrs. Alice Wells, who was part of his original group from the 1930s, was given control of the copyrights. And when we came back from Mexico, after we spent 3 years down there close to an extraterrestrial base that George had informed us, she transferred all the copyrights into my father's name, and we hold them now. And so while everybody out there thinks, oh, these are old pictures and we can do what we want, I've even had people claim they took the pictures instead. And I have constant fights, and I've spent thousands of dollars to enforce these copyrights and to make sure that the authenticity of this material and this program stays true to form. And there were a number of George Adamski impersonators who went around while George was still alive trying to give lectures to misinform and twist what he said. And they were unfortunately so stupid as to not know that he was actually talking in a particular place in a hall full of people. So they were hundreds of witnesses to where he really was and what he really did. And so you had misinformations like this, and like Valiant Thor, who we met, who was no extraterrestrial at all. He was nothing more than a Pentagon misinformation agent sent out to stew up the UFO subject and to infiltrate it and cause as much misinformation and mayhem as possible. And there have been other individuals since. Right now, I'm battling against a particular group in that operates out of the Netherlands, who feels that it's their right to do whatever they want as well and violate contracts. And so it's not always a pleasant prospect, and so I enjoy the opportunity to interact with people and talk to them and give them something to think about. And so, like I said, George was incredibly unique. He was given the Golden Papal Medal of Honor from Pope John the 23rd for delivering a sealed message from the space people to the Vatican 2 weeks before the Pope passed away. And so, and I have that in my vault. And so I can only say, having known the man when I was very young, having been introduced to some of his space contacts, having demonstrated from them some of their abilities, um, and then having these interactions continue. My father's first book, Why Are They Here? Spaceships from Other Worlds, was published by Vivantis Press in 1969. That describes my parents and my father's meeting with George's contacts and some of the circumstances that had happened due to them. When we arrived in Mexico in '69, we had bought a ranch within, I'd say 15 miles of the base that George told us about, and we could see the ships fly behind the mountain and disappear behind the mountain range, and so could the local indigenous people. They said, oh yeah, we see that all the time. But on the second day we arrived, the Mexican military police showed up in 2 large trucks with troops and metal equipment and metal scanners and rods and all kinds of stuff. And so the commandant came very nicely to the house and knocked on the door. And my father, who was used to dealing with officials, was not intimidated at all. He says, "Come on in, have a cup of coffee. We'll talk." And so they talked. And in the meantime, the rest of the troops drove all around the ranch and dispersed themselves and started probing and looking. And my father looked through the window and he started laughing. And he says, "You know, this makes me very happy, because if you didn't think there was something to look for, you wouldn't be here wasting your time."
That's
And
right.
so we had George's telescopic pictures hanging on the wall, and this commandant walked over and pointed to him and he said, "We know they're here. We know where they come from. We know that they're good for us, but we don't want them." And my father looked at him and said, "Well, that seems rather obtuse. I mean, if somebody wants to offer you something good, why wouldn't you take it? That doesn't seem very logical." And so the commandant said, "It has to do with political and religious reasons
Of
in this
course.
country. We don't want anything to rock the boat. You will be allowed to stay in this country unless you go amongst the people and start to lecture and talk to them." We received a abbreviated dossier from the Pentagon letting us know that you were coming, and we were briefed on your activities and where you've been and what you've got. And we know that you are legitimate, but you will not be allowed to freely roam within this country and educate the people that we don't want you to.
Yeah.
So that
Nothing,
says it all.
nothing but a mafia. Just a straight up mafia. You don't need you don't want their protection. Well, you're gonna need it because they're gonna destroy you if you don't do what they say.
Well,
Uh,
remember one thing. We are partially to blame too.
yeah, yeah.
This bashing of NASA and the government and everything, there's a certain amount of it that's legitimate, that they are withholding information from you. There's a lot of information that sits in warehouses they can't even assimilate any longer. It comes from equipment from Mercury and Gemini and the Atlas rockets. They have warehouses full of stuff, and the equipment to read it and look at it doesn't even exist anymore. It basically gathers dust.
Oh
They
my
are
God.
underfunded and underappreciated. But here is the major clause. We have voluntarily given them domain over protecting us, telling us what's good for us, and making sure that we are secure because we don't want to be bothered by these responsibilities. And so we have given them that power, and they feel, therefore, that they have the right to exercise it and to enforce it. It's really not rocket science here.
No, it's really not. But boy, they sure make it feel like it is. The technology alone, I think, is probably one of the biggest reasons that they don't want us to know um, about these things. I mean, just imagine what we could do with that. Of course, they'd make weapons, probably already do. But I mean, you could power everything.
Well, yeah, and we skip cycles. So in other words, they too thousands of years ago came across the atomic age, and they decided that this method was not safe because it produces one thing that we have no solution for: radioactive waste that is contaminated for tens and thousands of years. So they said, this makes no sense. Let us now turn and pivot and go the different direction to something that makes more sense. That then became hydrogen power. And hydrogen power uses water, and the only thing that comes out of the tailpipe is water vapor. There is no pollution. We have used atomic energy, and anytime there's a ripple in the oil market, we say, let's go back to it, let's go back to it, because the last huge catastrophe was Chernobyl, in which most of that was covered up. And then
Yeah,
Fukushima, not too long there, which contaminated a lot of the West Coast.
it
But
still
there
is.
were, yeah, and still is. And,
Yeah.
and there were a number of other nuclear incidences that have caused mayhem and contamination. And so our next step is not to go with a lithium battery system because it costs more in labor and in product to produce a lithium battery and causes more toxic byproducts than the petroleum product. So the natural pivot, and once again, what they're not telling you is in 10 years that lithium battery is worthless, and it will cost you $20,000 to $22,000 to put a new battery in the car you bought 10 years ago. What a great obsolescence program of keeping you constantly addicted to paying and paying and paying. So instead of pivoting and going to hydrogen power, we ignore it. And better yet, if we went to electrostatic, electromagnetic power, we would bypass all of those things and go to the free energy state, in which Nikola Tesla also demonstrated for us.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's another case. What'd they do with all that? What happened to all that technology?
All locked away because it's
Yeah,
that's how they do things. They say we micromanage what happens on this world very carefully. This little war is started. Have you ever noticed that all the places that are too poor to feed their people, too poor to give them clean water, which is the source of what, 4,000 infant deaths every day, too poor to give them food and nutrition, somehow come up with the money to provide them with weapons, grenade launchers, and bullets.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, there's always money in the bank for wars, and what and that's another thing. I mean, really, it's the people who are paying for all this stuff. We pay for all the research and all the equipment that they use for space exploration and for wars. And we're always left in the dark, never told any truth. It's wow, what a matrix we're in.
Well, what's worse of it all is that we throw away money invested in space is a 4-to-1 return. Hugh Downs, already in the late '60s, proved economically for every dollar you spent in the space program, you got $4 back in downstream technology. Think about all the consequences technologically from the space program having to do with computerizations, transistors, oh my God, lasers, digitalized clocks and calculators, your micro watch, your phone is a direct result of that type of technology. Microwaves, and unfortunately, there has not been a very concise and purposeful acknowledgement and projection of what we all have learned. I mean, we have saved millions of lives by satellites and space weather satellites tracking tornadoes and hurricanes, and we are learning about our planet and how things change. And so it has been nothing but a plus, the money spent in space. In fact, we were supposed to go to a space dominated economy, and that would have eliminated a lot of the problems that we continue to perpetuate now. But we fought that tenaciously by canceling the program. There were 20 Apollo ships built, 12 of them were usable. Apollo 17 was the last to go, and there were some numbers skipping because Apollo 1 burned on the pad. So Apollo 7 was the next one after that. But we have to also admire these people. For whatever we think about them, they're strapping their behind on a controlled piece of dynamite that's going to release energy and shoot them into space or blow them to pieces. So it's a roll of the dice. And so we have to give them a certain amount of credit for the bravery that takes, because most people don't have the guts.
I think I would crap all over myself, just the vibration before that damn thing even took off. That wouldn't be for me. It's a good thing we got people who could do things like that, surgery and all these things that I can't do, because population would be thin. Yeah, it sure would. So where are we? I mean, where do you think we are now? I mean, are we ever going to get? I mean, not disclosure for me. I've already got disclosure. I mean, I know they're out there. But I mean, is it ever going to come to? I mean, what about the ETs? They have no interest in telling us? I mean, they goof with people sometimes. They're up there. They play games. They know you. Like, I've had sightings, and I've seen crafts that I've seen the triangle, which I think might be military.
Yes, it is. It's ours.
Yeah, well, I've seen that one, and I'll tell you, it's amazing technology, because it had 3 points of light on a triangle, and that's all you saw at first was just the lights, the orange balls, and then all of a sudden the whole craft came into view, and and you couldn't see through it or nothing. It looked solid, and then it would disappear again and just be them 3 balls of light, and away it would go. So that was pretty amazing stuff. But again, I think that's ours. But then I seen huge craft. It looked like it was all energy almost. It was bright orange, but the light was contained within itself. Like, it didn't shine down on you. It was really bright if you looked up at it. But if you never looked up, you wouldn't even know it was there. It was quiet, and it was huge.
Right.
And so I know there's stuff up there, stuff out there. Sometimes I think these things are right over our heads and we don't even know it.
Well, that can be, yes. I mean, like I said, this is a world in which they travel past, and sometimes they interact, and sometimes they go upon their business and go somewhere else and go right past it. I think that we have to understand that these intelligent beings have a purpose, they have a life, and they have other things to do than just to entertain us. And they also are aware that the first steps are always to show themselves in the skies. And I think we're starting to see more of them in the skies for this reason exactly. We need a little shaking, a little awakening to happen here. And and so that's where it starts, because they know that, I mean, let's face it, they've flown over a nation's capital. What was it, July 4th of 52, in formation, and the military scrambled Lockheed Shooting Stars and F-86s to chase them, couldn't get anywhere near. It's on the front page of most of the newspapers of that time. They flew over London, 53, over Paris, 53. In November of 54, they flew in formation over the Vatican for 5 days and were photographed numerous times. If you look and do research into the newspaper articles, I would say that there's hardly a nation's capital on this planet that has not had UFO activity and UFO sightings. Now, that's got to be a first step, because when you do that, then you get to see what are the repercussions, what are the reactions of the public who see this. Because if it's negative, you're not going to force the issue and then come down in mass land, because then we will have another Orson Welles War of the Worlds kind of situation.
Yeah.
Right? So they do that first, exposure, people to see how we react, see what our mentality is. Unfortunately, the abductee fiasco has pushed us away from contact and interacting with them. But I'm hoping that people will eventually get to see it for what it is. In my book, I have a whole chapter based on that. And it's interesting to note that there is about 100 million people in this country alone that suffer from psychological disorders. And one of those disorders is the uh, victimization, where we want to play the victim. Like everything is happening to me, and it happens by bad space people. I knew one person that said, "Oh yeah, there were invisible bad space people in her office throwing stuff at her, and so on and so forth." They always have to play the victim in order so that they can get attention.
Yeah.
Now there's another 60 million people who suffer from what's called sleep deprivation. And when you look, the psychiatrist at Harvard showed the correlation. Sleep deprivation gives you tingling feelings in your body, and it feels like you're lifting off the bed, almost like you get some epileptic shocks. Well, that's exactly what a lot of the abductees are claiming. So there are a numerous amount of real disorders and problems that we suffer psychologically, mentally, and physically as a people, and should not be projecting on somebody else. I think it is incredibly unfair and incredibly arrogant to blame visitors from other worlds for all these so-called problems we have created and all these issues that we have imagined. And every time there's another science fiction movie, there we come out with another one.
Oh, I know. You know, the movies disturb me more than anything because it's always the extraterrestrials are always some big monsters who are going to destroy us or kill us or enslave us or, like you said, eat us or whatever. And it's like just one time. Can it ever be a good scenario? Because, I mean, they've been here for a long time and they've not killed us. They've not taken over the planet. And if they were going to eat us, I always say this, if they're going to eat us, I think our food would be a little better.
Well, not only that, the best movie that was ever done that I can remember is the 51 movie, The Day the Earth Stood Still with Michael Rene. That movie is about as close to how the situation really is that can be depicted. And in fact, an incident very close to that happened in Alaska about 5, 6 years before that. And so while the movie may not be based on that, the entire script and the entire environment of that movie is right on the money, 100%. And then if you look at ancient records, whether it's Toltec, Olmec, Aztec, Mayan, Incas, I mean, you can name them all. They all have the mentioning of winged people, not winged people, but people who came from the sky and excuse me, and and came to help them agriculturally, sociologically, scientifically, and then left peacefully. In fact, I just read an account last night. I was doing some research of in one of the Mayan pyramids. They found the tomb of a 7 foot tall, light skinned, red haired, blue eyed person that was considered to be one of their gods from the sky. Now, people can take that for whatever it is. I find no biases, whether you're red skinned, white skinned, blue eyed, black eyed, whatever. But in this case, this depicted a particular type of race that came to visit us. And there's the entire difference. There are races that come to visit us, not species. Human, humanoid, robotics like the Greys, and androids that look like you and I that only have 4 fingers. That's how you tell the difference. There are no lizards, praying mantis, lobster people, Sasquatch people, none of that. When I had the discussion with one of the doctors in the Southwest, I went to a symposium with several of the people that had retired from one of the large military facilities there. And his home, we showed the pictures and had his guests over, and we had a nice long talk. He said, you know, people are entirely ignorant and stupid as to the unbelievable manifestation of the human form. No lobster is crawling out of the ocean and starting to build a 747. No whale is suddenly coming out and building your Cadillac for you. He says this is all scientific hogwash. It is the human mentality and the construction of the human form that makes this advancement possible. And I had to agree with him 100%.
You mean we didn't come from monkeys?
Never came from monkeys. Like one person said, he said, you might have come from a monkey, but I sure as hell didn't. And so, no, our ancestors came from space. Now, evolution of the planet, of course, comes from the materials, the organic materials that come from space. They argue about whether it's primordial soup or whether it's panspermia or whatever. But basically, there are several tons of amino acids and organic materials that rain upon the surface of the planet every day. That's provable. That's why you get materials from other planets on this one. That's how you find microbes and meteorites in Antarctica from Mars.
And
So,
that would make more sense as to why, that would really fill in the gap as to why they're so interested in us. You would think they've been here a long time, right? I mean, there's God knows how long. And you think by now they'd know everything they needed to know and maybe move on, but they don't. And it would
well,
make sense.
basically, they are us and we are them, just at a different class level. Just because your kids are in first grade doesn't mean that they're monsters compared to the people who are in sixth grade or 12th grade. They are us and we are them, just at a different level of understanding and progress. It's that simple.
It is that simple. All right. Well, listen, before we're done here, is there anything that you want to get out there tonight before we close shop? And I want to give you the floor. I thank you for being here, too. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And maybe what do you got coming up? Anything people need to know about?
Yes, I will have the book at the printers by June 1st. So hopefully they'll get it formatted and out within 8 weeks from that time. And let's see here. I've got so many books on my desk. The book is called The UFO Reality: Can Truth Prevail? And so that's what I'm working on, and I will be working on after we're done here this evening. Secondly, I have decided to put together a George Adamski symposium at the old Palomar Gardens at the base of Mount Palomar, where they used to live and the photographs were taken. It is currently called Oak Knoll Campground, and you can look it up on the web. And it's an RV park, and it has accommodations and things there for people to camp or have cabins or their RVs and whatever. And on November 4th, we're going to hold a 3 or 4 hour symposium and open to the public. Anybody who wants to come by, have a cupcake, sit down. We'll look at the pictures, we'll look at the films, we'll have an open discussion. So at this point, that's what's going on, and I'll send you a copy of that notification so that you can have that. It has all the links on it for the campground and for the nearby hotels and motels, because not everybody wants to go camping or glamping or any one of those things. Personally, I like a comfortable bed to sleep in.
Yeah, as you get older, you kind of appreciate the bed a little bit more. Before we're done though, I wanted to ask you if you heard about the sun. There was apparently they claimed that a chunk of it had broke off. This was, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and it was apparently orbiting in the time. This was, actual news outlets, not, you know, for whatever it's worth.
Right.
But, yeah.
I have not heard that bit of information. First of all, just looking at solar dynamics, the sun is smaller than what you see because it is inflated like a beach ball due to the intense radiation activity. Remember, the sun does not give off heat. The sun gives off radiation. If the sun gave off heat, then space would get warmer the closer you go to the sun. It doesn't do that. It is the radiation waves that come from the solar winds that when they hit the atmosphere of a planet, that causes the heat and the atmospheric conditions. And so for the piece of the sun to break off, I think we would be in very serious trouble as far as the continuation of our solar system. What may have occurred is a very large solar flare may have broken loose and then shot out into space. But as far as the dynamics and circumference of the sun, I have heard of no dramatic change in that so far.
Okay, yeah, because that sounds serious to me. And when I read the article and it says a chunk of the sun broke off, and there was some kind of like funnel cloud up above the sun, and this chunk of sun was, and they said a solar flare had come out, but the chunk of sun was actually in this spiral on top, rotating. And I thought, well, that can't be good.
Well, not only that, look at the gravitational pull of the sun. I mean, the gravitational pull of the sun holds all the planets in orbit, no matter what distance they are from the sun. So the gravitational forces of the sun close to the sun itself must be so immensely strong. I would wonder how a piece would be able to expel itself away from the field that is around the sun. So, but like I said, I don't know everything, thank God. And there are lots of things I don't know, and I'll be the first one to say so. But I would examine that a whole lot more closely. It is true that there are changes going on in the solar system and with the sun, and that does not bode well for long-term um, existence.
You know, if we had put, and I say this so many times, I repeat this, but it's so damn true. If we had put all our resources into exploring, and maybe they do behind our backs, but I mean, exploring space and, you know, maybe finding new worlds, rather than all the resources we put into killing each other, well, imagine where we'd be today.
Oh, imagine where we'd be today. And I think that's what our space friends, were trying uh, to show us and exemplify for us, that look how far they got in 4,000 years of unfettered, unbroken progression. Here on this world, we last 2, 3, 400 years, we collapse, start again somewhere new, and begin the whole process all over again, whether it's Greece and Rome. Egypt lasted a little bit longer. The Sumerians, the Minoans. I mean, you can go around the whole planet and name civilizations that do that. The trouble is that is that we quickly crumble and then we lose everything. Look at all the technology and codexes we lost from the Incas, simply due to the superstitions and the biases and the hatred of the Jesuit Roman Catholic priests, who destroyed more knowledge than can ever be said. So until we learn to work together and to work collectively towards a future that makes some sense, not just for you, not just for me, not for the Russians, not for the Ukrainians, but for the planet's people, then we will have our work set for us.
Absolutely, and well said. Well, Glenn, listen, thank you so much for being here tonight. I appreciate it, and I love the work that you do. And just keep it up, and we'll talk again soon.
My pleasure, Mike. My pleasure to talk to your listeners, and tell them to feel free to let me know any questions they may have. And in the future, when you want to do another program, just let me know.
You bet. You bet. All right. Thank you again. You have a great rest of the night, and I hope you get more of that book done.
I shall indeed. I'll be working. Thank you.
All
Have
right.
a good one.
You too. Thank you. All right, folks. There he goes, Glenn Steckling. He's got so much. I mean, we could probably have done, you know, hour after hour after hour. He's got a lot of knowledge, and he's a realist too. You know, there is a lot of bull crap that goes on, and I've talked about it in the past. You know, with these conferences in the UFO field period. I mean, it's been stunk up. Got people, you know, right away. Somebody will say, "Hey, I came from Mars. I was a super this or that was worked on in secret caves or underground bases, and now they put me on Mars, and I've, you know, and you know, the stories go on and on and on, and people just, my point is, people just jump on that stuff. They want the big story. They don't want the truth. They want the big story. I want the truth. I could give a damn about the big story. I'm not much. I'm more of a. I like to learn. I love to get educated. And you know, if that's like TV stuff. You know, whatever. All these streaming movie thing. If it's not something that I could learn from, I don't waste my time with it. To be honest with you. So I am going to take my last break here, and I'm going to come back with you all. If anybody wants to call in, by the way, the number is 803-392-4566. It's not. I'm actually thinking this might eventually soon here, probably by August, be the actual number we're going to use. Yeah, cut back on some things here. Yeah, if you want to call in, you can. If you got questions, you want to get them to me through the portal, you may also do that. I've got a lot of guests lined up for the Sunday show, for this show, and you know, and remember, with Uncensored, when I started it, I told you it wouldn't necessarily, you know, it wouldn't be consistent. You know, there's going to be weeks when things come up and I can't do uncensored. But most weeks I will be able to do it, just to let you know. Now, as far as the last frequency goes, this is my main squeeze right here. So we're going to always do our best to make sure that, the show goes on. So with that, let's take this break. I am Mike Vara. This is the last frequency, and it is a Matic Monday. It has been one, really. It has. Thanks for asking. Have a good, well, we'll see you on the other side of the break, actually. We'll be right back.
But the radio is